Welcome. It's good to see you here tonight. I'm Marilyn Clawwitter, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters. This program tonight is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Berrien and Cass counties. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that tries to encourage voting, register voters, and let people know about issues that are of importance. During election years, we tend to have a lot of candidate forums where people who are running for office encounter one another and encounter the people who will be voting for them and give an opportunity to present their stories, present their views, and to be asked questions. In election years, that's what we tend to focus on. In other years that are not election years, we like to have programs like this that inform people who are going to be voters and who are voters about issues that are important to them, issues in the community that they need to have information about, and that can help them too become active and involved in their communities. Because the communities thrive as people are informed and have opportunities to ask questions on important issues. The League of Women Voters, despite its title, welcomes men as well as women. And outside you will find forums. If you would like to join the League, we would love to have you. And tonight's program is being recorded. We do that with our programs so that people who can't make it tonight are able to watch online. The way you can get access to that video is to go to our website, which is lwvbcc.org. And that stands for the League of Women Voters of Berrien and Cass counties, so it's easy to remember. And that will have a link that will take you to the tapes, and will take you to a lot of other important information as well. And through all this, you can get access to what the League calls its positions. Interestingly enough, one of the League's positions has to do with the subject that we have tonight, with criminal justice and the prison system. I was delighted when I saw today that the League's position is very close, almost identical to what we are going to hear about tonight. Restorative justice, having programs that have to do not just with identifying people's problems that have gone wrong and acts that they have performed in that context, but also correcting the behavior, correcting the problem, so that they can enter into the community again as productive citizens. So please consider joining us, not just consider it, but do join us in these efforts that we have to be nonpartisan and to make informed and participatory communities. So that is the context for this program tonight. The program that we're going to have tonight will begin with a presentation by our speaker and some guests that he has invited who will talk as well. After that, you will have an opportunity to ask questions. The questions will be presented to John Ripley, who is sitting in the middle there, and he will have a microphone. So if you have questions to ask, please hold the questions until the conclusion of the program, and then you'll get an opportunity to ask those questions for as long as we have time to hold you here and to hold our speaker here. Our speaker tonight is a lifelong resident of Berrien County. He's a graduate of Kalamazoo College. After college, he went to law school, and he went to Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., where he received his JD. He practiced in St. Joseph after that, and he has experience in many branches of government because he also was mayor of St. Joseph for 4 years. After that, he went to the Michigan legislature and served there as well from the 79th district from 1999 until 2004. And I suspect that some of his experiences there led to his emphasis in the court that he's presiding over now, because he was chair of the Corrections Committee in the legislature, and he was also vice chair of the Judiciary Committee. And then, not surprisingly, he became a judge. He has been a judge then, a Berrien County Circuit Court judge since 2004. And he's still serving in that capacity. He's currently presiding over 4 different specialty courts, and they are the subject of tonight. So please join me in welcoming the Honorable Charles Losada.
I want to thank the League. Also want to thank Ms. Biggert. Where is she? There she is in the back, who has her class from Lake Michigan College here this evening. So thank you for coming. I hope that I surprise you as to some of the programs that are taking place in your county. A lot goes on that people don't know about. The basic format, what I plan to do is speak for maybe 20 minutes. And then the best speakers tonight will be 2 of my guests, John from our drug treatment court and Lori from our Swift and Sure program. We'll share some of their experiences in the program. I haven't told them what to say. I haven't gone over anything with them. So whatever they have to say about the program will be news to me as well. But I think that their stories are good ones, and you'll appreciate hearing from an actual participant. All right, this is kind of a strange slide to start out with, but probably like many of you, I like Ken Burns in those documentaries that he does on PBS. So I was watching the Vietnam, I was recording it and watching it when I could. They were long, they were 2 hours long. But he had a great documentary on public television last week on the Vietnam War. Yeah, very well done. I had a chance to go to Vietnam in 2003 through the State Department and met some of their leadership there. It was a really fascinating trip. But what this slide demonstrates is in the entire Vietnam War from 1955 to 1975, there were 58,220 fatalities. Terrible, tragic. Went to law school in DC. I lived on Capitol Hill and used to run by the memorial and saw the names, just terrible. Last year in the United States, we had more than 64,000 deaths from overdoses. More in 1 year than the entire 20 years of the Vietnam War, which just tore our country apart. Obviously, we have a problem, a big problem, and it's everywhere. It's my family, it's many of the families here this evening. My wife's cousin had a son who passed away last week from drug use. It's just a terrible problem that we have. Berrien County had what we call drug court for years. And I'll go over the difference between drug court and drug treatment court. Our drug court was probably one of the first in the entire country. It was started by Ron Taylor. Some of you may remember Judge Taylor. And essentially our drug court was not a treatment court. There's 50 miles of Interstate 94 that travels through Berrien County. And along those 50 miles connect Detroit and Chicago. A lot of narcotics travel on the interstate in our county. And so essentially those defendants, it was really a jail overcrowding court is maybe a more appropriate term, because the intent of the drug court that was started back in 1991 was to move the cases rapidly. Some of the lawyers would call it, it's the rocket docket court, because those defendants were either being found not guilty and going home, or if they were convicted, they were going to be sent to prison. So they were out of our jail. As many of you probably know, misdemeanors in Michigan are any offense for which you can serve up to 365 days in the county jail. So on a misdemeanor, you stay local. A felony is any offense for which you serve more 366 days or more. When you go to prison, that's on the state dole. So the intent was, we've had a jail overcrowding in Berrien County, overcrowding situation in Berrien County for probably 30 years. Every morning I receive an email with what my number is. I have 72 beds in the jail. I have a really heavy docket because of the drug cases. The other judges have 44 beds, and I have to adjust to that number. If we have more than 3 days of overcrowding, we begin to suspend sentences and let people out on tether or something else. But in any event, this first And I do have handouts of the presentation afterwards. I made about 25 copies for anyone that would like one. But the very first program was started by Judge Taylor years before any other court of its kind existed. After that became the advent of the drug treatment courts. And the very first drug treatment court was in Miami-Dade County in 1992. It's a completely different animal. The drug treatment court is more of a holistic court. We do a lot of things. And just to describe to you what the drug treatment court is, it's a group of individuals. In fact, we have a team. We have a drug treatment court team. There's me. There's actually Alex Height, who's assigned to our drug treatment court, is here this evening. There's a representative from the Sheriff's Department. There's a prosecutor. There's a defense attorney. And then there's typically 4 care providers, Riverwood, different agencies that provide counseling to our participants. And we sit around, we meet for an hour before we go into court and discuss each and every defendant that I'm going to see that day. We discuss, how's Sally doing? How's Steve doing? Can we try something different with them? Where are we at? We just started something new about 18 months ago. There's a drug now, it's called Vivitrol. It's very expensive. It's come down in price. At first it was $2,000 an injection. Now it's down to about $1,200. But what it does, it blocks the sensors in your brain so that you don't get high. So people that have an opioid addiction can't get high. You got to be careful when you administer it, because if you don't have proper counseling, the person will overdose and die because they can't understand. Hey, I just shut up. I usually get, okay, I'll shoot up again, and they're gone. So you had to be careful in how you administer it. But for the longest time, we were sending our people to Grand Rapids to receive the Vivitrol shot. It's an intramuscular shot. I guess it's kind of a little bit painful, but the upstroke is terrific. We've had great results. We've had a lot of success by utilizing the Vivitrol shot. In fact, we've had such success, it might have a little bit to do with the fact that Alex's father is the undersheriff, Chuck Height, but we're starting to give that injection just within the last 2 weeks. I think we just have given one so far, and I had to sort of twist his arm a little bit. We're giving the Vivitrol shot in jail now before they get out. So I think that's really a very positive advent, and it's part of. I think it's part of the reason for our success that I'll show you here briefly. But we go over every single individual with our team meeting before we go into court. There are currently more than 3,000 drug treatment courts in the United States. Michigan, I should have gotten that figure for you. I'm sorry, I don't. But there's a lot. I know how many Swift and Sure courts there are. I don't recall off the top of my head how many drug treatment courts, but I would suspect that there's 83 counties in Michigan. I would suspect there's probably 60 drug treatment courts. The legislature last session adopted some certification standards so that every drug treatment court that wants to receive state funding, which obviously we all want to do, will now be certified and be following various best practices. Some drug treatment courts do not use medically assisted treatment. They don't allow their participants to receive methadone, Suboxone, different types of medications to help them. We do. And I think that's the right move. I know some judges don't like it, but it's the proper step, and I listen to my team because they're the ones that have the expertise. All right. This slide talks about the various, what is a specialty or problem-solving court? Again, problem-solving courts are a relatively new innovation. Sometimes some judges are resistant to it, I think, because it's different. And I've heard comments, oh, it's a touchy-feely. How are you going to like being assigned to the touchy-feely court, Charlie? How are you? I must tell you, in the last 2.5 years, I've been a circuit judge 13 years. The last 2.5 years have been the most gratifying years for me on the bench. When you can reunify a family, how this all started, I happened to have a cup of coffee with Marilyn, and we were chatting, and I was telling her, geez, oh my gosh, I didn't know any of this. Would you come and talk? And I told her a story about, and Angela will know her, but Amber. And she had been a heroin addict from the time she was 12, when her mother first injected her, when she was raped by her mother's heroin dealer. Her mother didn't have the money for a fix, and so said, yeah, you can have sex with my 12-year-old daughter. And they didn't want the daughter to remember that rape, and so injected her. And she was an addict till she was 40, and she graduated from our program. She'd never had a car, had never had a job, had never had a house, had 2 children that had been taken away from her as infants. When she finished our program, she had been clean for 18 months, had a car, had a job, had a house. She was renting it, didn't own the house, but renting a house, nice house, had her 2 kids back. I mean, that's amazing, when you can accomplish that. And it's not me. I mean, ultimately, the judge is a necessary component because we dole out the sanctions, and people, when they're in the throes of a heavy opioid, heroin, crack, meth addiction, their brain chemistry is all off. I've been to the National Judicial College out in Reno, Nevada. It takes anywhere from 10 to 14 months for your brain just to get back to normal. I mean, the chemistry is completely off. And so it takes a while. Judges are used to, I ordered you not to use heroin. But as people are coming off of this, you have to understand that they're going to relapse. And so we have ways to help them through that process. And we've had great success. But the specialty courts and what we do here in Berrien County, not only the drug treatment court, but the Swift and Sure pilot program, which Angela Biggert, who's here this evening, if we have any really technical questions, we can turn to Angela, because she was the very first probation officer in the state of Michigan to handle that program. Senator Prose has been really big on it. It's been in the press lately. We have the first and the largest Swift and Sure program in the state of Michigan. We also do sort of the traditional drug court. We do a mental health court, and I do what I call sort of a domestic violence rocket docket sort of court. The trial I did today, the alleged assault occurred on August 11th. So, I mean, you hear in California, in some places, it takes 3, 4, 5 years to get to trial. This crime allegedly occurred just 2 months, not even 2 months ago, and we had the trial today. So that court is really geared, what I really try to do with that one, if you have a 17-year-old son that pushes or punches his father and the daughter calls the police, 99% of the time, and I'm just like the other 10 judges in the county, when I set that bond, we order a no contact, because we've all read about the tragic results that can come from domestic violence, shootings and fatalities, stabbings, etc. So we 99% of the time order a no contact between the alleged victim and the defendant. Well, if Johnny's 17 and he's sleeping on grandma's couch while he's studying for the ACT, and maybe he was going to get a scholarship to college, but it could be a real life-changing event. So we try to move those cases quickly, so we get the family into counseling and we get Johnny back in the house and off grandma's couch. Grandma's happier, and Johnny is too. But those are our really, the domestic violence court is more of a de facto type of court, but we have 4 and then the additional one. But they're all aimed and geared at addressing a particular need. Judge Schrock started our Swift and Sure court back in 2012, and then I've run it for the last 3 years. Judge Butzbaugh started, actually we have a regional mental health court, which is kind of unique. It's both Berrien and Cass County, and that was started by Judge Butzbaugh in 2008. And then Judge Pasula did all the heavy lifting for me in establishing the drug treatment court in 2009. And that was really terrific of my colleagues, because there's a lot of work when you're first setting it up, a lot of documents to put together, and various filings with the State Court Administrator's Office, who is an arm of the Michigan Supreme Court. All right, next slide. Okay, again, here, these are our specialty courts. that I talk about. Okay. Mental health court established in 2008. There's 3 judges presently assigned to that, not me, but Judge Howard from Berrien, Judge Schofield from Berrien, and then Judge Herman from Cass County. Very nice guy. He replaced Mike Dodge. A lot of people in the room might know Judge Dodge. He retired last year. They have had 87 graduates to date from the mental health court, and their 2018 operating budget is a little over $250,000. They have a regional graduation ceremony November 3rd at the Niles Courthouse, if you're interested. Okay, the Swift Insure sanctions program. The Swift Insure program I also really like. It's interesting because all of the defendants, we currently have about 90, 85 to 90. All of the defendants that are in the Swift Insure program should be in prison. And that's what I tell them when they come into court. I have to do what's called a warning hearing. And I tell them, well, congratulations. A judge, a prosecutor, a defense attorney, or a felony probation officer saw a spark or something in each of you that they just didn't want to pull the trigger and send you to prison yet. But if you foul up 5 times, you're going to go. And we send probably 95% of the people on their 5th violation. But it's what I like to call super probation. It's what if I were to ask you, what's felony probation like in Michigan, you would probably describe Swift Insure. You meet with your probation officer every week. You drug test twice a week. They call your color. It's intensive supervision. We have additional funding available for Swift Insure court participants that isn't ordinarily available to standard felony probationers because literally all of those defendants have prison guidelines. And let me just quickly explain what sentencing guidelines are in Michigan. Michigan has what's called indeterminate sentencing. What that means is if you commit a crime, assault with a dangerous weapon, a 4-year felony, you can be sentenced for anywhere from 0 months to 4 years. 4 years is the maximum. Well, there's a grid, and there's a prior record variable and an offense variable, and you're scored based upon your past record. It's, I guess, one of the dirty secrets. On an OWI 3rd, everyone in the legislature likes to thump their chest and say, we're tough on drunk drivers. It's a 5-year felony if you have your 3rd drunk driving. I've been doing this 13 years. You don't go to prison on your 3rd drunk driving. The guideline range is still probably 0 to 7 months. So that's a jail sentence. But in any event, we score that individual with the offense variable and the prior record variable, and then a range comes up. So let's just say that this Johnny has had, it's not uncommon for me to have defendants with 35 or 40 prior convictions. Probably more customary is 10 to 15, but I mean, it's not uncommon to have 30 or 40 prior convictions. And I sometimes marvel at it because I'll tell them, you're only 35 years old. We didn't get jurisdiction over you until you were 17. I mean, that's not arrests, that's arrest, guilty plea, conviction, sentence, serving the sentence, and I marvel at it at times. But in any event, let's say Johnny is a bad guy, and it's prison guidelines. And the guideline range might be 10 to 24 months. Now, not to bore you with all these details, but there was a Supreme Court decision 2 years ago, Lockridge, where the guidelines are advisory, but I have to state reasons if I deviate from that guideline range. I stay within the guideline range 95% of the time. So I send Johnny to prison for 12 to 48 months. He doesn't go the full 4 years. I give him that. I sentence him to that range. The reason we do that is so that then Johnny's a better guy in prison, and he's not stabbing or beating up his cellmates. If he's perfect, I think they call them slips, or is it slips, Angela? I think it's slips. If they have bad behavior in prison, they get a slip. If he doesn't have any slips, he can be paroled at 12 months. If, on the other hand, he is a bad person, they might hold him for 2 or 3 Occasionally we see people that are serve the max. That's very unusual. The prisons like to parole people because that's, I think, $2 billion a year out of our general fund, so it's very expensive. But anyway, that's your quick primer on sentencing guidelines. So every SWIFT and SURE participant has a prison guideline range, so they're pretty hardcore guys. But what I tell them is, you can stub your toe once, twice, you can even goof up 3 times and still successfully complete this. So let's say they relapse, their cousin Stevie comes back at Thanksgiving and they smoke marijuana with him. They call Ms. Biggert up, they say, gosh, I can't believe it, I screwed up, come on in, we'll take care of it. That first sanction, they only get 2 days in jail. So if they come in at 3 in the afternoon, they're out at 6 o'clock the next morning. If, on the other hand, we have to drug test them, and then we confront them, hey, you test positive for THC, what's going on here? Oh, I don't know, it must have been, I was riding an elevator with a guy that was smoking, yeah, right. I give them 5 days in jail on the first sanction. There is no, we've had so many lab techs testify there's no such thing as the secondhand smoke and testing positive on our tests. So if we have to get it out of them, they get 5 days in jail. Second sanction, 10 days, third sanction, 15, fourth sanction, 30. And then I tell them if they're in there for the 4th time, I say, okay, there's 2 simple rules of this program, and you learned them in 2nd grade. Always tell the truth and just show up. And it still applies even with your 5th sanction. You know and I know I'm going to send you to prison if you goof up on that 5th time. But there's a range available to me. I can send you for 1 year, I can send you for 3 years. If you face the music, take your medicine, come in, I'll go the low end of the guidelines. If, on the other hand, the sheriff has to send the fugitive response team and SWAT and everybody surrounding the building and scaring all the people on the street, you're going to get the higher end of the range. And actually, I kind of like working with those defendants. I mean, I know they're kind of dangerous, but they get it. They're sophisticated criminal defendants, and we have had, I need to refer to my presentation here to give you the exact figures. Here it is on the next slide. We have had 137 successful discharges to date, which, when you think about that, that's pretty amazing. 137 people that would have gone to prison 100% of the time if it weren't for this program. You had to be careful. I did that corrections budget, as Marilyn said, in the legislature for 4 years, and you had to be careful when you listen to some of the groups talking about the cost of incarcerating a prisoner, because they add in the cost of building the prison. Well, once the prison's built, it's there. They don't rebuild it every year. So I think a more accurate figure, some groups will say, oh, it's $40,000 a year, the same as an Ivy League education. It's actually more in the range of $18,000 to $21,000 a year, which is still a ton of money. So when you think about that, each of those 137 defendants, and it wouldn't just be 1 year, they could have been anywhere from 1 to 20 years in prison. So make the math easy since I'm a lawyer, $20,000 a year for roughly 200 defendants. That's a lot of money. And it's a lot of lives. That's the thing that the league does a great job of publicizing these events. And one of the local radio stations called me about it, and I told them, it's not just the 76 drug treatment court graduates, but multiply that number by 10 or 20, because each one of them has a mother and a father. We know that for sure. Many of them have spouses or significant others. It's really about 10 to 20 people that are directly impacted by that addict and his or her behavior. So it's really a great program. Today, at the bottom of the slide I mentioned here, Berrien County Swift and Sure Probation Program is the benchmark, and it is. And Ms. Biggert and her partner, Mr. Coltez, are at the top of the heap. There's a Judge Alm, Project Hope. Some of you may, if you're really into this type of stuff, you may have heard of Project Hope in Hawaii. That's what I wish they had sent us out there for a seminar to learn the program, but they never did. But Swift and Sure program is modeled after Project Hope, and Angela, Randy, and I had a chance to have dinner with Judge Alm in Lansing 2 years ago, I think it was, and discussed the program. And I'm really pleased. When I took it over about 2.5 years ago, we had 40 participants. We're up to almost 90 now. We've nearly doubled. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. A lot of them do fail. Probably a little more than half don't make it. But for the 137 who do, it is life-changing, and life-changing for the community. I mean, going from spending $20,000 a year on someone to that person having a job, paying taxes, it's a real win-win. Okay, next I'll turn to drug treatment court. The drug treatment court in Berrien County, I am proud to tell you, is doing terrific. We are getting great results. I wish that we didn't have to have a drug treatment court, but as this slide indicates, approximately 10% of Michigan residents reported use of an illicit drug within the past month. We're a state of 10 million people, so 1 billion people in our state are using drugs. Part of the reason I wanted to get out and talk tonight was, and I'm not going to get into the weeds too much, but the whole medical marijuana issue in Michigan. I think judges, prosecutors, state police officers were almost afraid to talk about it. They just thought it was inevitable, it was going to happen, and why get in the way of a moving bus? I don't really have an opinion about it necessarily, but the thing that really gets me in court is when people lie. I know people can make mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes. But when you just lie, it just really irks me. And that whole medical marijuana debate, some of the big money players that were pumping money into our state to pass that initiative were saying your prisons are overflowing with first-time marijuana users. Well, number one, you can't go to prison. No one can go to prison on possession of marijuana. It's a 1-year misdemeanor. Actually, use of marijuana is a 90-day misdemeanor. So there's no way you can go to prison. Number two, practically speaking, I've been a circuit judge for 13 years. I bet I've handled easily over 2,000 possession of marijuana cases. How many days in jail do you think I've given those roughly 2,000 defendants? 0, because of our jail overcrowding situation. In 13 years, I have not given 1 day of jail time to any first-time possession of marijuana defendant. Probably 90% of those first-time marijuana defendants have received what's called a 7411 probation. It's a specialized deferred probation where if they successfully complete, I usually put them on for either 4 months or 6 months, so it's not even that long. In Michigan, you can only be on probation for 2 years on a misdemeanor, 5 years for a felony. So I must say, the flip side of not 1 day of jail, every single person that I put on 7411 probation who violated, I sent to jail because it's such a great deal. I've sent them for maybe 2 or 3 days, the most maybe 15 days if it was a really terrible violation. But with the 7411, you never have the criminal conviction on your record. You don't lose your driving privileges, and that's kind of my last slide, but that's where we could maybe use some of your help. If on your first drug conviction in Michigan, I'm required, I don't have a choice, I have no discretion, I must suspend your driving privileges for 180 days, for 6 months. If you have a job, I can make you eligible for a restricted license in 30 days, but you must lose it for 6 months. If it's your second conviction, the law requires that I suspend it for 365 days, eligible for a restricted license after 60. So transportation is a huge issue for us in our community that we serve. But that's what kind of got me about the whole, and I had no idea there were so many 20-year-olds with glaucoma and back problems. But that's another story. But in any event, it is what it is, and we're working within it. But I just didn't like it when they were not truthful as they were trying to move that initiative forward. This slide talks about the total number of heroin-related deaths in Allegan, because the league is both Berrien and Cass. I try to go regionally. Allegan, Berrien, Cass, Kalamazoo, and Van Buren counties has quadrupled, increased more than 400% in the past decade. the Berrien County Forensic Laboratory, which is right here in Berrien Springs. It's a great partnership that the county has. I'm not sure if Bill Wolf set that up. Whoever did, it's great. Andrews University, we have our own forensic lab right here in Berrien Springs, and we get our tests results so much quicker than other parts of the state. Mr. Rohrbeck at the Berrien County Forensics Lab has seen a 60% increase in heroin submissions just from 2015 to 2016. Heroin is a huge, huge problem in Berrien County. Drug Treatment Court established in 2009 by my colleague Angela Pasulo, who I mentioned earlier. This presentation, Frank Samps, I should thank him. He put this together for me on Monday or Tuesday, and it's out of date, if you can believe it. We have 76 graduates of our drug treatment program as of yesterday at about 11 a.m. We had 3 more people graduate. And Alex, who's on my drug treatment court team, and Angela as well, I really need to thank them, because that drug treatment court team, from 2009 to 2016, we graduated 50 people. So we averaged 6.25 people per year. In the last year, we graduated 25. So we went from 6 per year to 25 in a year, which is great. I mean, we're helping a lot of people. And I think it's the team that works hard. I feel bad for the probation officers, because they do these things called night hawk, where they go in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., and search the house for drugs or guns. When you're a felon on probation, you don't have Fourth Amendment rights. You waive those. So your car can be searched at any time, your home can be searched at any time. I'm glad I don't have to do that when I am dealing with my customers. It's a much different environment, but they've really done a great job, and I'm really pleased at the progress that we've made. The average drug treatment court client takes approximately 100 drug tests during their time in our court, and averages between 15 and 18 months in our program. One of the things that we started about a year ago, I really think it's important that people have jobs, and thank goodness the economy in Berrien County is terrific, and we have a lot of people that work with us. Mosaic is a great partner up in North Berrien County for us, and hire our people. They're not afraid of people with 3, 4, or 5 felony convictions. They give them a chance, which is terrific. So we've been able to require, there are 4 phases of drug treatment court. The first phase is the toughest, because we're hounding you. You're constantly going to classes. You're drug testing all the time. But then as you graduate through the phases, to get into the 3rd phase now, we're requiring that our participants have jobs. And we found, I tell them, hey, if you get up and go to work in the morning like I do, you're too tired to hang out at 2 or 3 in the morning and get in trouble. So, you need to get on a schedule, and it's like anything else. And I think that's led to a lot of our success. This is a slide, and I'm sorry, it's kind of a big room. I hope you can see it, but it essentially shows the drugs of choice. I asked defendants, oh good, we've got it on the side here. What's your drug of choice? Because they do everything. I mean, they smoke marijuana, they occasionally use meth, crack cocaine, but really my drug of choice, Judge, is heroin. And a big reason for that is because the price is so meager. For $20, I can tell you half a dozen streets within 5 miles of here where you can buy heroin, and it's, 10 miles a year, and it's not a problem. I think part of the reason, and there's smarter people than me that you could ask this question of, But I think that part of the reason that the price of heroin has dropped so much is the states that have the medical marijuana. In fact, I had a jury trial a couple weeks ago. It was a lawyer from Chicago who was convicted, had bought an illegal grow operation in Berrien County, and was allegedly shipping marijuana into Chicago by boat from New Buffalo and bicycle, some of the bicycle trails to avoid the drug dogs, the canine units on Interstate 94. But we're growing a lot of marijuana in the states with the medical marijuana, and then so the marijuana's homegrown now. It's not coming from Mexico. The heroin's coming in from Mexico now, and the price has dropped amazingly. It's really inexpensive, and it's stunning. It is true that not every marijuana user becomes a heroin addict, but I have yet to meet a heroin addict who didn't start by using marijuana. Very few. There are a few of them, and we're seeing that now, but it's scary because it's 16, 17-year-old kids, and quite frankly, I don't like to name different high schools, but they're from high schools where you wouldn't suspect. And they're higher numbers from there than schools that you would think have more problems. But that shows you 45% drug of choice heroin, 8% crack and powder cocaine, meth 12%, marijuana 17%. And the marijuana, I'm sure you've all heard this, is the THC levels are so much higher. I'll be 55 in a couple of months, so much higher than when I was growing up. Here's some sources if you'd like to study further. Take a quick screenshot of this slide, and I've got copies for you as well, but some articles about the heroin's comeback tragically here in Michigan. I told you, Marilyn, if I got telling stories, I got to start to move a little bit quicker because I really want you to hear from Lori and John. And then my next slide talks about what is an opiate. And we have, obviously, the standards there, but what I want to mention to you about this slide, it's interesting, just last week, the Michigan State Police now will no longer field test powdered substances along the road, and it's because of fentanyl. Fentanyl is so powerful that, I mean, they've had police officers die in certain parts of the country, and many become very ill just from touching it. It can penetrate your dermal layer, and so they won't test it, field test it anymore, which creates some issues for judges, but we're working through that, and I don't blame them one bit. Fentanyl, I believe, was the substance one of the substances that was involved with Prince and Michael Jackson. But you're now seeing synthetic fentanyl that's manufactured in China coming into our country, and it's super scary stuff. So, actually, I have an expression that I use. Everything that occurs in my courtroom and that I do is public record, but it's not my job to publish it. So I don't talk much about what happens, but I know this was in the newspaper, so I'll just briefly mention it. Last 2016, the PGA golf tournament was in Harbor Shores in Benton Harbor, and there was an NBC cameraman who died. Well, I just had the dealer that supplied the drugs to him, he overdosed and died. It threw the detectives off at first because he had a bunch of cuts on his face, and then they realized he had been dead so they weren't sure if there was something else involved, but it was insects getting into his body because he died near the dumpster at a motel up in Benton Township. But what had happened to him, he thought he was getting heroin. It was 100% fentanyl, and he overdosed and died. So it's very scary stuff. marijuana expansion. This talks about medical marijuana, its legalization in Michigan by initiative in 2008. I actually already kind of talked about this slide a little bit, but you're going to see more of this legalization. And reasonable minds can differ on this issue, and I'm not in the public policy business. I just interpret it and apply it now. But the one thing I'll caution you about, whatever decision you make, don't make it on bad information. I mean, remember, I've been doing this for 13 years and I haven't given 1 day of jail time on a first-time conviction. And then you can read the studies yourself and decide whether or not it makes sense to go further. Marijuana is big business. There have been quite a few articles about that lately. Occasionally I'll pick up a Detroit paper and I think they do a pretty good job covering this issue. Why do people use drugs? A lot of peer group, a lot of trauma. We see that all the time in our participants, and that's why the drug treatment court is as successful as it is, because we don't just treat the addiction, we treat the underlying condition. If there was a trauma, like that woman I mentioned earlier, had been raped at 12, had a mother who was a heroin addict, we treat the whole thing, because it doesn't work to just drug test, okay, you relapsed again, okay, I'm gonna give you a year in jail. That doesn't work. It doesn't get at the underlying trauma that man or woman experienced. So we do that through our drug treatment court team. Okay, I think my next slide is an interesting one. Yeah, I like this one. I went to the drug treatment court out in Reno, Nevada, the National Judicial College. There's one big judicial college, and they do a week-long program. When I first started doing this about 3 years ago, Judge Bruce and Schofield had both done our drug court, or drug treatment court, similar type of court. And they said, you got to go to the seminar, Charlie. There's a lot to learn. It's really different. So I went. And they had MD, PhD from Johns Hopkins University, and I remember his presentation. He was really good. And then I saw him later at Southwestern Michigan College, interestingly. He travels the country, and he talks about your dopamine levels. And so if you start to the far left, on a good day, all of us in this room are probably, around 100 parts per million dopamine in our brain. Now let's say I drive home, buy a lottery ticket, scratch it off $100,000, find out my daughter who's a high school, the second oldest, who's a high school senior this year, got into her college of choice. I don't know, just everything goes terrific. My dopamine level might be more like about 160, 180. The next one, sex, is 200. After that, nicotine cigarettes, interestingly, are about the same level as sex at 200. And then cocaine, crack cocaine, you're pushing up towards 300 parts per million. Heroin, up nearly 500 parts per million. But look at the meth. That's the thing that's just so stunning. It's 1,000 parts per million. And there's an expression that meth addicts will use. I think they call it chasing the dragon. Where they try to chase that first high. The first time they use it, it's just an unbelievable sense of euphoria. And so then they keep using it. We have a pretrial services coordinator who's really sharp, Luke Whitman is his name, does a great job. And he told me a story about, it's a really sad story, but it shows the power of meth. You can pick a meth addict out, their teeth are brown, their face just looks terrible. They're 25, they look like they're 65. But this lady, while he was speaking, what Luke does, he screens the people before we arraign them. Because of our perennial overcrowding situation, we try to set a bond, a reasonable bond that a person can get out, but we want to make sure that they're not going to, victimize the community in another way or not show up. So there's kind of a magic to it almost. So Luke interviews them, and while I was interviewing this lady, she pulled 2 teeth out of her head, because that's another thing that meth had, and just laid them on the table, and it was like it was no big deal. She was trying to figure out how to get out and get high again. But that's the grip that methamphetamine has on people, and we're really lucky that the drug of choice, if you think back a couple slides, meth is not as high as some of the other drugs, because it is tough. And those are probably some of our tougher cases to crack. Pace here. Okay, good. Summary. Specialty courts are an important part of our trial court response to the realities in our community. Think back to that first slide I showed you. 64,000 people died in 2016 in this country. 52,000 died in 20 years in the Vietnam War. It's a really challenging situation. And trust me, like I say, it's not my job to publish it, but the people that come into our drug court, a lot of nurses, accountants, I don't think we've had a lawyer or a doctor, a lot of nurses, and my mom and my sister are nurses. I love nurses. But there's people from all walks of life that come through our court, and from every family, from the finest family to the most challenged family, they come from everywhere. How can you get involved? Again, I've got handouts here, but there are some opportunities. I mean, it's tough because this population, as I indicated, their brain chemistry is a little bit off. They're not themselves as they begin the program. One of the biggest issues we have is transportation. The Kalamazoo Drug Treatment Court, they stopped it actually. I looked into it recently. But for a while they had a retired sheriff's deputy driving an old car around, and he would pick people up and take them to their sessions, their counseling sessions, or their drug testing places. And we have multiple places where you can drop drug test. From the courthouse in Niles to St. Joe to KPEP to other locations. So we try to make it as accessible as possible. But we started actually an alumni group during my tenure as the drug treatment court judge to try to keep some of our participants as coaches for the people that are still in the program. But I guess if you really wanted to get involved, the best person to contact is Frank Samsel here, and I've got his number and extension. I would like to try to start a program where we could give some of these people rides. And what my idea, I need to put it together more, but I've talked to some of the people that are involved in FAN, Families Against Narcotics, that group that sprung up. Carol Stockman and a few others are involved in it. They've all had family members who have passed away, overdosed, and died. And they just, in their grief, I think they'd like something positive to do. So I'm thinking about trying to partner with them. I was going to try to, through a Rotary Club, buy a car, but the county's somewhat reluctant to do that because of liability, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm thinking about trying to develop a matrix where we can. The problem is we're dealing with human beings, and everyone's a little different, and no one's perfect, and I'd hate to have a tragic result, but try to somehow screen. 80% of the people that come through my court I'd have lunch with, have dinner with. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but on that rare occasion. But I'm trying to work on something along those lines because I really think that's something that's needed. And then here's some additional resources, again, if you're interested. We have 2 participants who successfully completed our program. One is John, who completed our drug treatment court. He's got well, not quite. You're close. Phase 2 still? All right. Okay, 2 months and he's done. So he'll be done by the end of the year, which is great. And he's done terrific. Well, he's been in my drug treatment court, and interestingly, he doesn't have much of an accent, a little bit. You can tell he's not from here. Niles, like me, he's from New Jersey, and he went through a drug treatment court in New Jersey before he came into ours. And he and his wife had a baby, actually, while he was in the program. And I'm going to tell this part because he really teared up in my courtroom probably 5 or 6 months ago when you told it. But it really sort of hit me right here because he, at one point, have you had 1 or 2 sanctions? Yeah. Not much, just a couple, stubbed his toe a couple of times. But he told me once, as I was getting ready to sentence him and send him to jail for a brief period of time, he was still grateful to be in the program because he was finally, he was not high, and he got to say goodbye to his father before his father passed away. And he was so proud that he was able to do that because he had been out of it for a while, and that would have been a hard thing for him to live with if he hadn't been clean for some period of time to do that with his dad. So please join me in welcoming John. He'll do a great job.
Hey everybody, I'm John. And a privilege to do that, to explain to you guys how my life has changed. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for being here and listening. I'll be really brief. I can tell you that for the majority of my life, I struggled with addiction and alcohol. About 10 years ago, I made an effort to try to start getting clean, and like Judge said, I entered a drug court in New Jersey. And I managed to get some clean time, and I actually managed to start working in this field. I got a job as a counselor and a residential manager in a program in New Jersey, and I was helping people. I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't focused on myself enough, and I wound up drinking, and I relapsed. And from that relapse, I went further back than I had ever gone before. I used all the drugs that are out there, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine. I used, pretty regularly. Stole my thunder with the thing about my dad. My father would be very, very, very proud of me today to see me standing before everybody talking about this. So 19 months ago, I was at the end of my relapse. I had been relapsing for about, I'd say 4 years. I came out here to Michigan with my ex-wife, and I fell into. I had never experimented with methamphetamine. I used to use cocaine and heroin. When I came out here, I found that lifestyle and took me down pretty quick. And I started, in my past, I had possession charges for cocaine, and I have felonies on my jacket. I never went to prison. I've never been in prison. I've spent a lot of time in county jail. I've done a lot of time in the county jail, and I was lucky never to actually go to prison. But 19 months ago, I was at the end, and I made a decision in support of my addiction to shoplift, and I had been caught shoplifting a few times already, and I had known that if I had gotten caught again, they were gonna hit me with a habitual felony. And my addiction was so strong that I really thought that I was invisible, and I thought I can get in and out of stores and nobody was paying attention, and I was wrong. And I got arrested and I got put in jail, and my guidelines are pretty big considering, and I was offered drug court while I was in jail. I took it because I had a little bit of experience with the New Jersey drug court, which, and I'm not just saying this, but it is what it is. I had thought I'd be able to just, get out of jail and kind of breeze through the court and get out again on probation and be done. But I found that the drug treatment court here was they were a little more involved in my life. And I got out, and one of the first things that they did for me that was invaluable was they sent me to outpatient, which was pretty intensive. I had never done. It was 3 days a week for 3 hours a day in therapy, talking about my life. And I had never done that before, and I had never been given the opportunity to do that before. So I did that for 48 sessions. I think I completed 48 sessions. And, you know, I had to fit that in my schedule because I have a family that, you know, I was just getting back into my life. So I had to fit all that into my schedule. But, I had the desire to want to stay clean. So I managed to fit it in my schedule. And, you know, all the people around me, my job and the jobs that I've had, I was always up front with them, and I would tell them, this is what I have to do, this is what I'm doing for my recovery. And so I completed that. That was probably one of the first, that was like phase 1 and phase 2 that I was in. And in that process, my father passed away. And, you know, I had been clean and out, and he knew and my father was down in Florida. He was with my sister, and he knew I was doing good. He could tell because I wasn't asking him for money. He just knew. He knew I was doing well, and I got to touch, base with him again, and let him know that that I was the son he raised me to be. It wasn't a thief and a drug addict. I'm definitely, standing before you guys today. I am a productive, responsible, and I'm accepted today, and I'm a member of this society and our community. And so when he passed, one of the best things about it was that drug court, I think they already knew. Like they knew that my father had passed, just through other people in drug court that had seen me at a meeting, that heard me talk about it. So I was able to go into group, and they knew about it, and my counselors knew about it, and everybody was so supportive. And I hadn't had the desire for a long time to want to be clean again. And from day one, I wanted to be clean again. And drug treatment court, they gave me a solid foundation. If I didn't have all that stuff, if I would have been released to just regular probation, or I wouldn't have had all that stuff, and I probably would have relapsed again. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity they've given me. In this process, I have my 10-year-old son. I'm a father to him again. I'm a boyfriend to the mother of my children. We're both in recovery. She just celebrated a year. I celebrated 18 months a little while ago, which was, awesome. So we have our 10-year-old. We're parents again. And, I go and I report, and I go to court, and my life is good. And I have a foundation. In 2 months they're going to be gone, and nobody's going to be looking. And I think that I've finally have like integrity in my life again. I can look at myself in the mirror. I used to, go by mirrors in my house. I couldn't even look myself in the face, but I'm proud today to say that, these guys helped me immeasurably. I had a baby 5 weeks ago. I had a little baby boy, and I'm a father to him today. I'm very, very grateful for drug treatment court. They pulled me out of the hole, and if I look back and if they weren't there for me, I would have, there's a good chance that I might have slipped through the cracks, and I'd be in prison right now, and I'd have nothing. I have my whole life back again, and I can't squander that opportunity. It's something that I hold dear and I cherish. And I've gotten to know my PO. I've gotten to know Caitlin and some of the members on the team, and they're connected with Riverwood, and I've never felt scared to talk about how I feel if there was something going on. I've never had any fear that they were gonna hurt me in any way. But they were there to keep me on the right road, and I did know if I messed up that where they were gonna put me, and that's a good motivator too. But I do it today because I want to do it. But they absolutely laid the foundation for me and gave me solid footing this time. The first time I did it, first time around, I just kind of walked my way through it. I'm an active member of Narcotics Anonymous today. I chair my own meeting in Benton Harbor on Wednesdays in a really rough neighborhood. We get some pretty wacky people coming through there. It's a little rough, but you know what? Now I'm helping people. And this weekend I start some classes to take for recovery coach. I start my classes. I have support. You know, I see the guys. I have a couple other guys from drug court that are constantly at our meetings, and we know about each other's lives. And I have accountability today. That's what they've given me. That's what I wanted to talk about. I have accountability today. I'm accountable, and I want to be an accountable member of society, and hopefully I can keep going in the direction I'm going. And thank you so much for letting me share. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really proud of John, and I think you all are too. But the thing that really struck me about it is he was speaking, and he's with Bob. Bob's one of our participants. John mentioned himself, his father who's now passed, but his 10-year-old son, his 5-week-old son, and his girlfriend. Think how different. I mean, his life would have been completely different sitting in prison for 5 years. But I mean, the one hand he did it to himself. But think about how different your girlfriend, your 10-year-old, and your 5-week-old's life would have been. So, all right, our next quick speaker. She's nervous, so be nice to her. The good news is, Lori, that we don't have much time because we want to save time for questions. But I'm super proud of Lori also. She is one of our Swift Insure program participants, successful graduates. She's done. She didn't have to be here. I still have my hooks in John a little bit, so it would have been harder for him to skip. But she came here on her own, and I'm very grateful. Thank you, Lori. Thanks.
Well, he's going to be a tough one to follow. I did write some things just to remember what I needed to say. But November 11th of last year, I died. I had no heartbeat, didn't breathe for 32 minutes. I'm here today because of my friend in the red there that gave me CPR. They administered 8 shots of Narcan to get me back. Yes.
That's a lot.
That was pure fentanyl that we found out later was pure fentanyl, which she was speaking of earlier. But my opiate addiction began, I had back surgery in 2011, and I became addicted to my pain pills. I found one day that when I took a pain pill, I could scrub the floor with a toothbrush, and I was the nicest mom there was, and I could go to soccer practice and do this and that and this and that, and life was much, much easier, and it just progressed from there until it became heroin. I started shoplifting to support my habit, which is what landed me in the court system in the first place. I was put on probation prior to my Swift Insure experience and failed. I think my PO was probably warned about me when she got me that I wasn't going to make it. When I first met Judge Lasada, he looked at me and said, "Well, you're a mature woman." So in other words, he was saying, "You're too old for this." I don't even know what to say, basically, is what he said. You know, what can I say that you don't already know? And then the second thing he said was, "This is your new best friend, Angela Biggert." And I took it to heart. She knows too much about me, I'm sure she'll tell you. But I wouldn't have made it without her, and that's for sure. And that's a huge, huge part of the program is the supportive team that you have. I'll move along. I was sentenced to KPEP for 90 days, which was also a life-changing experience for me. It was intensive rehab, 90 days, meeting after meeting after day after day after day. I thought it would never end, but looking back now, I can tell you it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. When I was on probation, I got involved with Mosaics, and I took their Jobs for Life program, and that also changed my life. I started working there in April, and I've been working steady. Well, actually, I want to say in March, when I was arrested and started the Swift Insure program, I had nothing. I had lost everything. I was living in a hotel room with my 3 children. It was, I guess some people would say that was not nothing, but to me it was. Every possession I had, everything was gone. I hadn't worked. I had nothing. So I started working for Mosaics, and I have a car and I have a home that's full of beautiful things. I get up and I go to work every day. And 3 weeks ago, they gave me the keys to the store and made me manager. So that's huge for me, because I've lived the last 10 years with nobody trusting me. I was a thief. I was a liar. Nobody would have trusted me with the keys to a store. So good things, really good things have happened for me, and there's lots more to come. And I want to say one more thing. I had been teasing Angela about my party for my Swift Insure graduation. So I just want to say, this is my party tonight, and you are the guests, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lori. And if you take one thing from this evening, I hope everyone will realize that people that have an addiction in our community are just like us. They're not evil, nasty, rotten people. To be candid with you, it's easy for me to sentence people who abuse children or elderly people. I don't take any pleasure in it, but I think I'm protecting the community, which is part of my job, along with a lot of other people. But it takes a little chunk of my soul when someone flames out and doesn't make it through our drug treatment court. And for some of the Swift Insure participants, not all of them, some of them that we get are difficult, but they're good people. And so give them a chance, give them a job, give them a ride, give them a chance. So thank you very much. They are your courts. We're happy to work for you. And like I say, give them a ride, give them a job, and recognize that heroin addicts, meth addicts, crack addicts are not all evil people. I mean, they made some real bad decisions, and they do some bad things, but many of them can be brought back from the brink and become productive members of society. So tell your legislators to continue to fund our programs and support them, and thanks a lot for having us this evening.
Thank you so much. And if you haven't already joined the League of Women Voters, now's the time to do it. Thanks so much for coming and joining us. Thank you for coming.